Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda. This is my pug Watson, who's going to join us for who knows how long. I am autistic. I have ADHD. I have a memory disorder called SDAM, which stands for Severely Deficient Autobiographical Memory. And I have total aphantasia, which means that I cannot visualize or experience any of the senses in my mind. I talk about all of these on different playlists, so make sure you check them out. As a reminder, I'm not a medical channel. This is mostly my personal vlog of being a late diagnosed autistic ADHD woman. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit today about my memory disorder because I haven't really done a video about it in a while. But I also want to talk about how that relates to having a late autism diagnosis. Oftentimes when, from talking to other autistic people, when we get diagnosed as autistic later in our life, our brain will kind of like go through and replay memories from our childhood and have it go like filter through the lens of autism. And we recreate scenarios and it's like, oh my gosh, that wasn't because I was lazy or too shy or oh gosh, I can't even think of all the words right now, but like just socially awkward. It was autistic traits showing up. The problem is because I have a memory disorder, this process has been a little bit difficult or different for me because I don't have episodic or autobiographical memories, but I do have some semantic memory. So that means that I do know some of the things that that did happen to me as a child or different things that I did as a child. I just don't remember them as memories. I remember them like I'm reading a grocery list. So there's no emotional ties to them. But that being said, I can have a current emotion about something that happened in my past. And I'll get an example of that later on about something that happened that I don't remember experiencing, but as an adult looking back, get very angry about it. So I have a playlist called Autistic Traits, and in that playlist, I have several videos where I have this list. So when I first suspected that I might be autistic, I started jotting down a list every time that I came across an autistic trait that I related to. Now, these are common autistic traits. They are not diagnostic criteria. Those are two separate things. These are traits that a lot of autistic people might relate to. But if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and we are not all the same. And just because you may not relate to one of these traits in the same way does not mean you are or you are not autistic. Also, these are human traits. Every single human on the planet may experience some of the things that are on my list. The thing is, when these things become so frequent and they basically become debilitating in your life, then that's when, it starts to become autism. Sure, if one of these things happens as a one-off or, every once in a while to a neurotypical person, it's a common thing that might happen. But for autistic people, these are things that we we go through every single day. Don't know what's going on with my throat today. This is the second take I've had to do this. I normally film once off the cuff. I don't like rehearsing my videos, and I do as little editing as possible because I want you to see how it would be to interact. Watson. This is a perfect example with an actually autistic adult. My dog's barking really, Watson, come here, triggers me. It's one thing that I'm constantly working on him with because of a sensory sensitivity to loud noises. When he barks, it's just like my entire body tightens up. But where was I going with that? Oh, I did have to retake this video because on my first time through, every single time I moved, my microphone was flapping and it was making noises that I decided were just too distracting to put up as a video. But otherwise, I do try to keep all the weird intricacies. That has to do with my aphantasia. I have a hard time pronouncing words because I can't hear them. I can't test it out in my mind first. I don't have sound in my head and I can't see the spelling of the word in my head. So when there is a large vocabulary word that I know, I have to just practice it out loud and see if I can get it right, because I can't just like quietly say it to myself in my head because there's no sounds in my head. My internal head is quiet. There's no rehearsal in my brain. That's why that's one reason why I have this vlog, because I process out loud. I can't process in my head. I do have thoughts, not empty-headed. They're thoughts. There's just no sound to them. Anyway, I digress. So what I was talking about before, I think the dog got me off on a tangent. I don't know. There were several tangents there. I started this list. My psychologist loved it. He said that it's very good to come in with a list, helps them with the evaluation process. But if you have a list, put it on a list that you created a list, because that's a good indication that you are autistic, that you've created a list. There's very few neurotypical people who think that they're autistic. All right. The first one I'm going to talk about is a little bit of play. So when I was a child, I didn't really play with dolls. Like, I didn't have a mommy and a daddy and create scenarios and play stories with my dolls. But I loved arranging the furniture in the dollhouse. That's what I would do. I would get all of my doll furniture and like place it around. My grandma, what I call my Mima, she had this dollhouse kit that I wish I knew what the brand was. It was from the 70s. So all the furniture was from the 70s, which as a kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s, this was really cool. But it was like floor pieces and wall pieces, and you actually could build the dollhouse every time you wanted to play with it. And then there was all this furniture that you could arrange. And I would spend hours just rearranging furniture in my dollhouse instead of playing with the dolls. The dolls were like chopped liver in my mind. The second one I have on my list is I liked hanging out with adults more than my own peers. When I was about 8, 9, 10, I wanted to hang out with the adults in the room more than with kids my own age, or I often liked hanging out with younger children and like a leadership role. I like to read to children a lot, or play school where I was teaching them, which kind of makes sense that I ended up being a homeschool mom, because my way of play was much more structured. And whenever I would babysit, I wanted to teach kids. I didn't role play or do imaginary play. But most of the time, like when I was at Girl Scouts, I wanted to hang out with the counselors more than I wanted to hang out with the other Girl Scouts. So I really struggled with my own peer group. I wanted to play younger or much older. And you might be hearing my dog snoring. He's now at the end of the bed snoring. The third one I have on the list is I never understood the latest fashion trends that kids my age wanted. And since putting this on the list several months ago, I have a little bit more understanding of why that might be. So autistic people often do not like change, and a new fashion trend is going to be a change. So when something new came that was now in fashion, I usually oftentimes won't like it at first. And once I see multiple people use it, then it becomes part of my environment. It's more comfortable all of a sudden. And then I'm more excited to adapt it. But by that point, we're on to the next fashion. My dog is really distracting me today. I'm sorry. So it's not that hold on. One of the ways that I masked this, because I didn't understand why new fashion things bothered me, or like I didn't like them, was I grew up with a single parent and we really couldn't afford the new fashion stuff anyway. Anything that was trendy, was going to be more expensive. And so I would put it off to, oh, I don't want to wear that stuff anyway. But really, it took me a long time to process and be comfortable with any kind of change before. Yeah, it just took too long for one. It took my brain to take a while to get comfortable with the new trendy thing. Okay, the next one I think might be an autistic trait. I'm curious. I would like to read y'all's comments down below if you relate to this or not. I put it down because there is a high comorbidity of like dyslexia and like speech problems in general. I mean, not that dyslexia is speech, but I don't know. I just felt like it might be related to autism, but I wasn't sure. I was hyperlexic as a child, and I didn't have dyslexia, but I did have a speech impediment around my R's. So even today, when I say the word really or some other words with R, I have to enunciate carefully. And oftentimes when I'm editing back a video, I will hear the willy instead of really, like it'll come out sounding more like a W. I can now hear that. When I was a kid, I could not hear that I was saying a W instead of an R. And I had a teacher named Mrs. Roberts, and I apparently called her Mrs. Roberts, but I did not hear myself saying that. I don't know if that has to do with autism or the aphantasia and not being able to hear sounds in my head. I'm not 100% sure, but she would get angry and literally, as a teacher, bully me when I wouldn't say her name correctly, which made no sense because I was such a good child and I followed all the rules and I never caused any problems. But she would tell me, I'm not going to speak to you until you say my name correctly. Or she would tell me, you have to sit in this desk until you say my name correctly. But the problem was, I didn't hear myself saying it incorrectly. So I was always so confused why she was so angry at me. And it wasn't so bad. Like none of the other kids that I'm aware, maybe they did it. And again, I have memory disorder. So I don't remember being bullied much. This one stands out because it got so bad that my mom had to get involved. And so my mom's told me about it, since childhood. It's like I was saying at the beginning of the video, I don't remember being in that fourth grade classroom, sitting there in that desk, having this happen to me. I just have the facts about it now as an adult. And now as an adult, I'm really angry at that teacher that would treat me that way. But I added to the list because I feel oftentimes autistic people, our speech might be slightly different than a neurotypical person in some way. I feel like maybe we have oftentimes different speech impediments that we may outgrow. I still struggle, like I said, with my R's, but now I can hear it a little bit more, but sometimes not in real life. Sometimes I only hear it when I'm editing back a video and I'm like, oh, I said Willie instead of really, but usually nobody comments on it. Like I think it's still fairly subtle. Now you're going to be listening for it, aren't y'all? It also depends on how dysregulated I am. When I'm more tired, these things will show up more. So I'm curious if you had a speech impediment as a child or still do, what letters were difficult for you. For me, that was the only letter. Like, I didn't go to speech therapy or anything like that because that was the only letter, I think, that I struggled with. There may have been one other letter, but I don't remember. And the last one that I want to talk about is, and I kind of mentioned a little bit, is I was always the good child. So part of my autistic mask was always be good, put other people's comfort ahead of your own. And I mean, just basically, yeah, be a good girl. And so the thing is, teachers and adults often are so focused on the child who is causing behavioral problems in a classroom that the good child gets overlooked. And nobody saw how much I was struggling. Nobody realized, and part of this was because my mom, we now know, was also late diagnosed. Watson, get off. My mom was also autistic, but she didn't realize her autism until I got diagnosed. The amount of time like I would spend on my homework just to, get a passing grade, my mom thought was normal because she also struggled and had to put in way more work than what a neurotypical peer would be. I remember when I was in high school being so confused, like, and in college especially, because at that point, like, I was, in a dormitory and I saw how much my other college peers studied to do work. And I always had to put in so much effort. Um, and but I was always the good kid. I never caused waves, so nobody paid attention to me. Nobody saw how much struggle was actually going on. So sometimes, if you're a teacher, or if you're a parent, and you've got like that, like just super perfect, like almost too good of a child, pay attention, because that's the other thing. Like, some kids want to curse. Like, oh, let's put in a curse word to be rebellious. I never cursed as a child because my programming is what I like to call it, because it feels like it was programmed. It was, my mask was like programmed of who. My dogs have been very distracting in this video. Okay. Oh yeah, my programming. So I couldn't curse because cursing went against, like, Amanda equals good girl. And in my, like, good girls don't curse. So, I mean, it felt like a computer programming in my head. And now as a 40-something-year-old woman, I am trying to literally learn to curse for the first time in my life, because I realized it wasn't a choice that I consciously made. It was society telling me what a good girl should be. And that really pisses me off. That's a lot. That's the thing. Like, there's a lot of anger that late diagnosed autistic people have to process, because there are so many choices, from something as stupidly minute as that to huge, huge life altering consequences, like the people we married and the jobs we've taken, that we're acting out of as our masked self, not from choices that we made. Whew, that was a little bit of a tangent. But what I'm saying is, like, I was such a good child. Like, the only times that I was considered, I don't want to say bad, but like defiant or unruly, was when the stress got, or the anxiety got so much that I couldn't handle it, and that pushed past my masked self, or the times where my PDA profile of autism would flare up. And PDA is pathological demand avoidance. And as a child, my PDA wasn't as severe as some children, because my mask of be good overrode my PDA, and I would push past the discomfort of the PDA. As I got older and my mask started to break down, that's where my PDA as an adult has come out a lot more. Where, and I have some more videos, so I'm not going to go into PDA too much right here, but I was always so good, and that would confuse adults. because it would seem out of character because I was so like insanely too good. And then all of a sudden, I would refuse to do something. Like absolutely put my foot down, refuse. Most of the time the adults would be like, well, okay, she's good most of the time. We'll let her do this thing. But it was because at that point, the anxiety or again, various things was literally just too much for me to handle. And I had to freak out and a meltdown, but it didn't, look like a typical autistic meltdown. So I never got diagnosed. Anyway, I hope this video helps y'all out, see some of y'all childhood traits. Again, I have to kind of relive my experience a little bit different because I don't actually have the memories, the experiential memories of these things, but I do have some facts about how I was raised and what I did. So I'll say goodbye here, and thank you so much for watching. Your support means the absolute world to me. Till the next one, guys. Bye.